Cloning is, to put it lightly, an ethically complicated practice. During the Republic era, cloning was very heavily regulated and basically illegal, with the practice mostly relegated to the black market purchase of cloned organs and tissues by rich old people. Most of those who did try other forms of cloning ran into numerous difficulties, and most clones were of very, very low quality. Convention held, if you wanted to make a secret fighting force, even a small one, you were probably better off using either recruited soldiers or battle droids. But that clearly doesn't tell the whole story, because if cloning was such a difficult enterprise with little success, how then was the Republic grown a massive and highly effective clone army, one which challenged the Confederacy of Independent Systems and paved the way for the imperialization of the galaxy? The fact is that the deadly efficiency and quality of Kamino clones used by the Republic were never seen before. Why? Well, that's what we'll be discussing today. Before I continue though, I do just want to say that the majority of the information in today's video comes from Plagueis, which is one of my top 2 or 3 Star Wars Legends books. There is an excellent audiobook version of Plagueis. It's full length, it's got a great narrator and full sound effects and music.
Chapter 30. Taking the Future from the Now.
And you can listen to it for free with a trial to Audible. Just go to audibletrial.com/EckhartsLadder, and you'll also be helping out the channel. Anyway, as Plagueis explains, Kamino was beyond the rim. It was technically outside the galaxy, and thus clearly outside of the Galactic Republic's influence and laws. Kamino and cloners worked for very, very rich clients who would often travel covertly to the secluded planet, usually bringing their own genetic material for the Kaminoans to clone. And there was literally no request that the cloners would turn down, as long as the client could pay anyway. From game animals or pets, to genetically modified slaves used only for forced labor, with their own digging instruments molded onto their own body, to creatures meant only to be tortured, and of course, armies which threatened galactic stability. In pursuit of their perfection of genetic modification and cloning, Kaminoans would happily take live prisoners as scientific subjects, performing vivisections or any manner of medical trial, whatever was necessary, and I have no doubt that the cloners would have also manufactured bioweapons, plagues, whatever else, if requested and capable. But why were the Kaminoans like this? Were they just perhaps genetically predisposed to amorality? No, and it's actually more interesting than that. Kamino was not always a watery planet, but at one point suffered a cataclysm and a great flood. The species was forced to adapt, building their stilt cities while also heavily researching genetics to ensure the survival of their species. Plagueis explains that it was this event, and presumably the nihilism which accompanied it, that led to their advancements in cloning and their species-wide abandonment of moral scientific limits. Here's a nice quote. "Moral principles regarding natural selection seemed to be something they had left on the floor of what was now Kamino's planet-wide ocean, which perhaps explained why they were no more reluctant about providing game animals for sojourn than they were about supplying shovel-handed clones to work in the mines of inhospitable Subterral. Because of their willingness to do basically anything, Plagueis also called the species the closest to a pure Sith race in the Star Wars galaxy. They were of course incredibly pragmatic and dedicated to furthering their own position above all else. This disturbing history of both hardships and shocking scientific testing, combined with their repository of information accumulated over thousands of years and their existence outside of the galaxy, meant that not only were the Kaminoans the only beings capable of producing a secret clone army, but also the most capable, by far. Although the species had only a little experience with humans, they were familiar enough with their psychology to attempt to minimize human emotions through both genetics and testing. They'd also of course cloned humanoid species for a variety of other purposes. So in the end it comes down to skill, willingness, a disturbing history of amorality, and circumstance. Upon learning that they might be tasked with building a galaxy-toppling army, The reaction of the cloners was joy, because it meant a big payday was coming. After the Clone Wars, no cloners were really able to achieve the same success, and other cloning methods, which of course were not based on the same scientific background, tended to fail pretty spectacularly, and no other faction made a clone army comparable to that of the GAR. Anyway, hope you guys found that interesting, but before we leave, I do have my hashtag AskEck question of the day. Today's comes from the Wingland, who basically asks if Thrawn was alive when Palpatine was about to re-emerge during Operation Shadowhand. Would he have joined the New Republic, joined Palpatine, or kept on with his campaign? I've talked about this sort of topic a few times, and I might have even answered this question before, but Thrawn was an interesting character. The original Thrawn trilogy didn't give him a whole lot of moral ambiguity. He was a more kind and fair Imperial officer, but he wasn't a good guy. That was sort of retconned, but more just changed a little bit with the Thrawn duology, the Outbound Flight, and other material, which put him as sort of a more benevolent figure who was mostly concerned about protecting the galaxy from the Yuuzhan Vong, and just generally making a government which could protect the galaxy from whatever threats it faced. So when it comes to the Dark Empire, although this is an incredibly powerful and militarized government, it was so evil and so dark that I think Thrawn would have seen this as a bigger threat than anything else facing the galaxy. He would thus choose to align with the second most powerful faction, which would have been the New Republic. Unfortunately, Thrawn of course didn't make it, and it's no surprise that Palpatine's reemergence was sort of right after the chaos caused by Thrawn's campaign. And it's also worth noting that Palpatine didn't think Thrawn would join, and if you want to learn more about that, you can read the Dark Empire sourcebook, which is surprisingly pretty great, especially considering when it was written. It's worth noting too that Dark Empire and the Thrawn trilogy were both written at the same time, so it's pretty incredible that they work together at all. Anyway guys, that's all for now. This has been your host, EckhartsLadder. As always, have a great night, and may the Force be with you.